I watched Blood Vessel. Have you seen Blood Vessel?
Have not seen it yet. I've seen the ad for it. I think it's got like the Nazi symbol on the ship. Isn't it about like the vampires on the ship?
Yeah, it's about vampire Nazis.
Okay.
It's about
vampire Nazis on the ship.
It's about vampire Nazis on a ship. It's fairly low budget. This is definitely a low budget indie film. It's actually it was distributed by a group called the Horror Collective, and I've heard about these guys. They've distributed about 6, 7, 8 films. They're all low budget. They actually, like, I think they're a group that you can actually approach and say, hey, I've made a low budget movie. I don't know how it is working with them, but I've seen their name out there a little bit, and they've produced a bunch. They're all in this realm. We're talking sub-$1 million low budget horror films. This one fits right within there. I mean, the movie as a whole, I could have used more. I guess they had enough vampire Nazis in it, but realistically, they threw Nazis in here just for the sake of throwing Nazis in there. I would think, I actually researched the guy who made it. I believe he's a visual effects guy, because they used a lot of gratuitous CG of the boat and like different things happening. I mean, and like for filmmakers out there, you see that quite a bit. Like, you know, a filmmaker spends 25 years as an editor, and then they go raise the money to make a film, and of course it's edited beautifully, but they have something that they bring to it. And CG guys and animation guys are no different. Like, if they spend a lot of time, like I know a lot of guys like this who've been in. Just talking with one last week, and he's in animation. He's a project manager for an animation studio, and yeah, he's been doing animation project management for 15 years, but he still wants to make his own film. And eventually, you know, you save up enough money and have enough contacts in the industry and go do it. And of course, it's going to be helmed around it. So this guy's clearly a visual effects guy because it was gratuitous. The film itself, yeah, I mean, it was also like, and they had kind of low budget masks for the for the Nazi vampires, but they're not they weren't very, they looked like monsters. But what I thought I wanted to talk about in watching this is, as I was sitting halfway through it, I was wondering when exactly now first off, when exactly did Nazis become kind of the butt of jokes for horror films, action movies, like Dead Snow? We've all seen Dead Snow.
Remember Overlord too? The one that came
Overlord was fantastic.
Yeah.
They're both those are both kind of, Overlord was awesome.
Overlord, especially the beginning scene in that movie on the plane was just
and there's some great gore in Overlord.
Then it turned into sort of like a standard kind of B movie after that, but that first scene in the movie is amazing.
Yeah, no, it was good.
It was a cool idea though. Yeah.
Oh no, it's a great idea. But I was trying to think, it's funny that like literally we're talking less than 100 years ago. We're talking one generation ago.
Yeah.
Nazis were the most feared like people on the planet. Like, they were a legitimate thing in the 40s. Like, you feared these people, and now here we are less than 100 years later, one generation later, and they're continually the butt of jokes. I guess that's part of the
it's because they get used a lot in movies as the because there's actually a whole subgenre of like Nazi zombie villains, vampire zombie villains, all kinds of stuff like that.
Well, it's just Nazis are now like they're like kind of like their own subgenre.
Yeah.
And what I was thinking, I just was watching, it's like, when did Nazis like think about it? Like, it's not a lot of things, like, it's a real thing. Nazis, they're a real thing, and then all of a sudden now they're kind of this subgenre out there. But I actually think that it was the Indiana Jones films that flipped them from we can't make fun of Nazis to we could totally make fun of Nazis.
No, well, the first Indiana Jones movie is very serious. Like, those Nazi villains were scary in that first one. Then how like the Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, they sort of revisited the same territory, but had a different tone.
They were literally
because Last Crusade was Remember how like Marcus Brody was super bumbling, and everybody was kind of like, the tone just really shifted in that movie. As far as like the first one, like kind of serious in spots, like straight just badass adventure B movie, but like great B movie.
It would actually be, now that I think about it, it would be in the 80s. Sort of somewhere in the 80s, they became like, you could make fun of them. And then now they're a complete subgenre, because now if you think about the Blues Brothers, there were Illinois Nazis. Illinois Nazis were in there. That was 81.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think. I was just trying to think. All of a sudden they went, and that, you think of, like literally in '81 when the Blues Brothers came out, and they make fun of Nazis. I hate Illinois Nazis. But like when they talk about that, and they were literally bumbling idiots, played by
Yeah,
comedians.
this would actually require.
You're talking 40 years after these people were a legitimate thing.
Oh yeah, it was. Right? Yeah, it wasn't not that much time. But now
I was thinking about, like, they've become this Nazis are kind of like this subgenre. And I had a bunch of. I think it's actually something to be explored. It's kind of good because as soon as you put Nazis out there, people are like, oh, it's a Nazi subgenre film. Yeah. Like even House of a Thousand Corpses was Dr. Satan seemed very Nazi-like. Like, I can't remember because he was experimenting on humans when they kind of.
I remember he had the gas mask and stuff, and he was doing the experiments. Yeah. Probably sort of like maybe they were doing like maybe there was definitely like weird medical experiments, things like that. Yeah, I don't remember.
All of a sudden something happened and they switched to this basically butt of the joke subgenre where Nazi films. But I also feel that Nazi films there's more that can be done. Like Dead Snow, for example.
That was definitely more kind of like a Dead Alive kind of tone in that movie.
Yeah, it was a Dead Alive kind of tone. But I just, it made me think, is there a way to like bring back Nazis in a way where they're legitimately scary? Because I don't think they can be legitimately scary anymore.
Like, because there's been so many. Yeah.
Well, vampire Nazis, zombie Nazis, zombie. There was even in what's that TV show, Man in the High Castle, is even having
that's like an alternate sort of
reality.
History. Yeah.
They just I don't think they can be taken seriously anymore. But I think there's I don't think we've fully tapped this Nazi subgenre as well.
Oh, I'm sure somebody will come around and do a really scary version of the Nazi villain.
I think there's a story out there.
There's enough of those movies. It's enough of a subgenre where it just hasn't really happened yet.
Nazis really, because if you think about it and what Nazi, Overlord is a great example of this, because Overlord actually is explored that Nazis are kind of creepy, what they were doing. Like Nazis were tied to the occult, and Nazis were.
And Hitler was obsessed with the occult and bringing creep. I mean, that's what the whole video game series Operation Wolfenstein is about.
Yeah, but I think that's also. I mean, there's more to be explored in there. So while I was watching it, I'm not gonna say I was disappointed by Blood Vessel because it is what it is. I to watch it. I was entertained, but it did make me think about this. I don't know, like this Nazi subgenre, and I think. There's more to be explored in this subgenre.
Yeah, I think it's just an element of them doing, because most of them that I see that are kind of like Last Crusade, where it gets a little bit more bumbling, or it's just kind of more like you see the same movie over and over again. Mm-hmm. I think that there will be a director that will put a different flair on it, or just a little bit of a different approach to put that hook on it, or make that kind of different movie that really makes that subgenre excel. But a lot of what I've seen in there has just kind of been more or less generic, kind of,
Yeah, they're like, boy, what would make these zombies a little scarier? Oh, they're Nazi zombies. Oh, okay. We'll make them Nazi zombies. I was like, this is World War. And by the way, like Blood Vessel by no means did it have to take place in World War II. It could have very well taken place in the 70s, 80s. So there was no story driver in there that was like, well, these have to be allies. And they had an Australian, an American, and an English guy all on a boat that randomly goes into a Nazi ghost ship. They board it, and it happens to be filled with Nazi vampires. The whole concept of it was simply because someone probably over a beer was like, how about Nazi vampires?
Yeah.
And then it came from there. It's like, well, why would there be Nazi vampires? And you created the scene to come out of there.
Or maybe they had an idea about people on a ship. They were tourists on a ship that get killed by crazy people on there. And they're like, well, why don't we turn it into Nazi vampires instead of regular vampires tag. So I think it's kind of a way to throw a little bit of a hook in there. Yeah. But although after a certain point, when you've seen a lot of those movies, they are kind of the same movie over and over.
Yeah, again. It would be Yeah, a lot of times I see indie film, you know that like, okay, when you get to a studio film, it's manufactured because a bunch of people are sitting around and they're talking with their marketing team on how to construct this movie, and it's probably been flipped around about 17 ghostwriters before some guy gets credit for it. But we were talking about an indie film. 9 times out of 10, it started at like a bar or over beer. So they're like, hey, I got an idea. And so it'd be funny to go like, it's like, okay, what was the first idea? Was it that like, hey, I have this CG background and I can make a boat? Oh, when is it? Or is it like, I got an idea, Nazi vampires. Okay, how do we construct a story around it? Like, I guarantee that, stuff like that, happens. It'd be interesting to know where they got the idea. But I think Nazis, like there's a way, like it needs to be explored. I think when you look at stuff, it's like, okay, we're at peak capacity for zombies. I don't think there's any more zombie bills. Although I've noticed a retraction in zombies. Vampires are kind of in the middle. Got this. It's like, I think there's a lot of room with Nazis. There's a lot of room to explore in there.
Actually, the Wonder Woman, the first movie, they actually had a really good Nazi villain in there. There's the female doctor.
True. Yeah.
With the scarred face. Yeah. Yep. That was a good villain. Yeah. See, and that was actually a scary villain in that PG-13 movie.
And it just, and I will double down on this. You can think about it. Zombies are everywhere. I still think there's room. Like, I still think there's room for more zombies.
Well, there's a lot of room for the right director with creativity to make it different. Yeah.
Because I think the one that people aren't touching on is like, hey, if we want to make it about zombie, or if we've got to make it about Nazis, it's got to take place in the 40s or the 30s or whatever. Yeah. Well, part of the lore of the Nazis was they went underground.
Yeah.
That they went to the South Pole and set up camp. It could take place whenever. This could take place 80s, 90s, 2000s.
That's true.
Nazis could be living and hiding right now.
That's actually what that Amazon show Hunters is about, the one with Al Pacino.
Yeah,
it's about how Nazis are hiding, and then they get a bunch of people to go after them and hunt them down, the ones that have been hiding for a long time.
Well, they still, even today, they'll find old Nazis who are living in a house, and they still have their Nazi paraphernalia.
Ones that are in like their 90s, Now that real life stuff is far creepier.
And that's real life, but let's take that a step further. That 90-year-old Nazi loyalist probably has a kid who has kids. There's probably young Nazis out there who've been trained in this, and we could be talking stories about these guys, these second-generation Nazis in current times. So I think this is just all to say, like, hey guys, Nazi vampires, cool, but we got room here. We got room for the Nazi subgenre. I think there's lots of different angles we can still take with this. We don't have to stick with Nazi zombies, Nazi vampires, dismembered Nazis, and they all take place in the same time. This subgenre has room to grow, is my point.
Yeah, that's my issue with the subgenre in and of itself, although there's been some notable ones, but overall it seems pretty generic. So you're right about the room to go through.